All right, this is it. My best constructor loadout video. I've pushed back on this topic for years, but I get the question constantly, so I'm breaking it down for you guys. What you're seeing on screen is kind of a template loadout. This can change in a lot of different ways. So I want to say what this video is, who we're going to talk about, and the timestamps down below are there to skip around if you need it. First and foremost, this video is focused on defense. If you're running a constructor with a loadout that I'm showing you today, you are placing your base down on the objective, on the defense, and you are making your walls thick and you're keeping the enemies away. That's the idea. There are a lot of very, very strong constructors in the game, and there are some really fun offensive builds. I'm going to link my top 10 constructors you need video in the description down below. That video is kind of a precursor to this one. If you've seen that video and you have all 10 of those constructors, you are ready to watch this video. And even if you've seen that video and you haven't kept up with the news, you should know that since all of my constructor videos have gone live, something changed. Warden Kyle got buffed. We'll talk about him later, but he is 6 times better than he used to be for healing, and they added energy generation. He is an S tier support character for sure. He's going to come back up, but I'm going to get back onto the focus here. There are some offensive constructor builds in the game that are really good for doing launcher damage. You know, did you know that Demolitionist Penny is the only hero in the game that directly, specifically buffs rocket launchers? You can buff rocket launchers with a lot of different heroes, but she's the only one that specifically buffs rocket launchers. And she's a constructor, and there are a lot of really fun constructor builds with like decoy spam, and there are some exceptions with like Dennis Jr. where we're not going to be using him in today's builds, but he does give you the team perk totally rocking out, and that's insane. All of that is covered in the top 10 constructor video, link down below. I'll have some other links to offensive constructor loadouts if you are more focused on doing damage. So today we're going to be talking about defending builds. Now, if you are going to be building a defense, you need to understand something. First and foremost, use the correct element builds, okay? So if you are in a fire zone, it will do double damage to wood. Enemies that are fire do double damage to wood. Enemies that are water do double damage to brick, and enemies that are nature do double damage to metal. So long as you know that, you can then use the proper build for each mission. There are really only 2 builds you should use, and that's brick or metal. As I'm currently recording this, we are in a fire season, so most 4X missions are fire element. Just use metal in that case. If it's a water mission, don't use brick, use metal. And if you are in a water mission that has metal corrosion, still use metal, because metal corrosion is one of the most confused modifiers in the game. Basic husk melee attacks cause metal buildings to corrode. That does not include smashers, that does not include the mini boss, that does not include mist monsters. That is basic targets. So we're talking about regular zombies, small zombies, you know, fat huskies that might get through your defense. If you're trapping properly, those enemies should pretty much never be hitting your base, and especially if you're using the right loadout, today's topic, you should not be having normal enemies getting to your base. So if you need help making trap tunnels, I have an entire playlist on trap guides. I know these videos are a couple years old, but I haven't made new ones because I just don't think it's necessary. This is my series talking you through how to build certain objectives, and pretty much every mission is different. You need to be fluid about it, but this teaches you the fundamentals. So if you've watched through this series and you have a basic grasp on how traps work, you know that tire traps are directional, floor freeze are directional, and oh goodness gracious, the cannonballs bounce, people. Broadsides, they bounce. When you shoot a broadside off into nothing, it's not doing anything. It needs to bounce between a wall or 2. All right, so you need to place the broadside and have a wall 1 tile apart, or 2. You can get away with 3, but ideally 2 or 1 tiles apart. In a perfect scenario, you've got 2 broadsides facing each other, because the cannonballs bounce. All right, the cannonballs bounce, people. So as long as you know how traps work and you're using the right element build, the only exception would be like a water metal corrosion mission. That's an exception to that rule, where you are not wanting to build out of brick, but you might be scared of metal corrosion. I really think you should only use brick or metal. You can max out wood if you really know what you're doing in certain configurations. It does make some sense sometimes, but metal and brick are pretty much your main defense options. So this is a defensive guide. Now you know how to trap properly and you know which elements to use. All of those links are in the description down below. Let's talk team perks. Now, the first one I'm going to talk about is right here because I've already got it used. Supercharged traps. That is unlocked through Mega Base Kyle. He is a base game hero, but he is a mythic. So the only 2 ways to get him are from llamas. Coincidentally enough, I'm recording this on a day with superhero llamas available. If you are lucky, you might get Mega Base Kyle from here. 1,000 extra tickets is cheap for that. I do believe he can be in regular llamas, although it is excruciatingly rare. And the normal way to unlock him is through the collection book, researching him. This is really expensive. I do not think this is worth it. Supercharged Traps is awesome. We'll talk about that in a second. And Mega Base has a great bonus, which we'll also talk about in a second. But all the other constructors I'm talking about today are also excellent, and you really don't need Mega Base. So I really don't recommend spending 5 weeks worth of flux on this character. You'll do just fine without him. But if someday he's in your llamas and you get lucky and you end up with a copy of Mega Base Kyle, he's great to have because he extends the base range by 1, which does not sound like a lot, but I promise it is, because that's not just like one direction. That's the whole perimeter gets extended by 1. Every trap that is affected by that will be doing more damage if he uses Team Perk, which is Supercharged Traps, and every wall in that range will be buffed by every other constructor you're using. It's really nice to have. 3 tiles in the lead is nuts. He will blanket an area. It's really, really good. We use him in Frostnite a lot as well. And Supercharged Traps, as mentioned, I got a buggy game here. Okay, switch to BR and back. Supercharged Traps increases trap damage by 8.5% for every constructor in support. Now, that is a 42.5% damage bonus. That is so good. That is a lot of extra damage. When traps unbuffed are already plenty strong, this is a super good defensive, offensive build if you want your traps to do a lot of damage. I have a whole series on that, link to those down below, where I use Supercharged Traps. It's a pretty fun build. Now, if you are playing more normally, you're probably using Recycling. I believe this is available as soon as you have the game. I don't think there's any hero necessary. Basically, your base will just generate materials. It's it. You just, whatever you used, metal, brick, or wood, you'll just generate those builds. Now, you're not usually going to make a profit. If you're somebody who has set up their Storm Shield defense to have a whole recycling chamber, then you're good forever. But this is a good resource in ventures or whatever. But honestly speaking, farming is really easy. I don't think you ever need recycling, although even that being as it may, you still might just want to use recycling anyway, because you're hanging out by the defense. You're probably building the traps and the walls, and you're not running around farming in those games, so getting a little back is nice. I actually run recycling in super easy missions. If I'm running a low-level mission to get V-Bucks, say, I will just use recycling, because I might as well get that wood back, or if my teammates build, they can just steal my recycling. I don't care. That's a really good perk to use for those use cases. Now, those are like the only 2 perks that you would normally use. The third one is another kind of offensive build, and that is Boom Base. That'll increase everybody's damage and crit rating by a small amount. It's nice to have. It's not incredibly strong, but sometimes it's fun to play with. If you need to activate it though, you do need to use rad heroes. So Battle Beat, super nice. If you get 10 eliminations in 9 seconds, she'll increase your damage and melee attack speed. That's a super nice perk to have. And then you kind of need to make a compromise, because you can't use Fumble. Sub wafers can be kind of good if you want to go get some sub wafers, or if you just want easy stats, then I recommend Sid here. He's just a hero that exists. You get him from the campaign, and then you got Boom Base active. That can be a pretty decent team perk if you want to do a little bit of extra damage. Now, the other 2 that I'm going to recommend are a little more specific. Totally Rocking Out, as mentioned earlier, you get that through Dennis Jr., who, as I am currently recording, is available in the event shop. Now, I'm going to recommend the timeline description down below. This is a really good resource for knowing when stuff comes around. I'm recording this in the June to August event here, so if you're out of season, you might have to voucher him. But if you've unlocked him and you have Totally Rocking Out, that can be really good to make your weapons do a lot more damage. And the other one, if you're a regular player, you probably know where this is going. Blast from the Past. Because you are running a defensive build and you're building a base that is just a defense, staying alive is really good. Archer regularly uses Constructor in our Frostnite runs, and when you're eventually challenging power level 500 husks, having triple health is kind of a big deal, and you can make that even more effective by having Prehistoric Iza and support, also available this season. Making your armor a lot higher can go a long way, and then we're going to swap out Battle Beat for anybody else. The only hero that really makes sense is Vigor. She is super weak. She does not heal you by a lot, but it is something. But if you want to just activate the team perk, she will get the job done, and that's pretty much it. So I'm going to leave this back to Recycling, because I feel like that's the most basic Constructor team perk you could use, and I want to fill out the rest from there. So now that we've talked about the different team perks, let's talk about possible commanders. Now, I'm kind of going to gloss over Mega Base Kyle, because we already talked about him, but he increases the range. That's an immediate upgrade. I really like that, whether he's in the lead or support. Now, I need to say this right now before we move on with the commanders. Every single commander I'm about to mention works excellent in support. It's why I didn't want to make this video forever, because whatever commander you use from like the top 5 best ones, they will be your support, and then the loadout is basically the same 6 jumbled characters. So we're going to talk about a lot of the same characters today. I'm only going to mention like 9 or so, but Mega Base in the lead or support, super good option. The other, my personal favorite lead, is Base Kyle. He makes your builds have more health. Do I need to repeat that for anybody in the back? He makes your builds have more health. It's as simple as that. In support, it's 28%. In the lead, it's 84%. That is a lot. In the end game, metal can get up to like 9,000 HP or more. I don't actually know the exact value. I don't pay attention to that stuff, but you can make them dummy thick with Base Kyle in the lead. In fact, it's strong enough to stop a smasher twice. That's a big deal. Power level 250 smashers hit like a truck, and he will stop them. Now, the community's most favorite commander in the game is Ice King. He will take that and 13,000 dummy thick. Somebody in chat said that. If you ever want to watch these videos live, by the way, Twitch link down below. Ice King is the community's favorite commander, and I see why. He will not make your walls much stronger, although I will say every base gives your walls 60 armor. You can see it down there. Kind of an interesting thing. Most people don't think about that, but every base will make your build stronger. Meaning, even if you're using like Demo Penny with rocket launchers, for example, and you're focused on doing damage with your weapon, you might still want to put your base down. It's still going to help. And I don't know if bases stack. I think if a piece of builds is covered by a base, it's going to have 60 armor no matter how many bases are touching it, but commander perks will stack. So if somebody is running Mega Base Kyle, it'll have that nice wide range. If somebody comes behind him and puts down Base Kyle in the lead, you'll have much stronger walls, and that range will still be a thing. And you can have super strong walls that freeze enemies. That's what Ice King does. He will freeze enemies for 4 seconds. That is a really, really nice perk, because even if a smasher crashes through your wall and breaks it, he will be frozen in place for 4 seconds. That might not sound like a lot, but that is plenty of time to at least address the situation, turn around, go to that smasher, shoot him for 4 more seconds. It's a really big deal, and that is a really, really nice perk. So a lot of enemies, if they are not strong like a smasher, might just smack your wall, get frozen for 4 seconds, and then get back to it. And there's a 15-second cooldown on that, but that just slows down every single enemy. They get 1 free hit, and then they're frozen for 4 seconds. That's a big deal. I can understand why people really like Ice King, and even in support, and the commander slot at least, even in support, he's slowing enemies down. When enemies are walking 15% slower on your builds, they're effectively getting hit by your traps for 15% longer. They're taking 15% longer to go through your builds. If you have a 6-tile long build, and you have Ice King in support, it might as well be a 7-tile long build. So that's just a nice passive bonus, and it's why Ice King is always in support, and that's one of those really good bonuses that can be affected by Mega Base Kyle, because he can stretch that floor out by just 1 more tile, which might not sound like it matters, but it makes a difference. Now, the last primary commander that I think is relevant to every single mission type is Power Base Nox. Mine is not leveled up because I'm a founder and I might as well use Power Base Penny, but it's identical. Power Base Nox is available in regular missions. He is excellent. He heals your builds by 11% every 10 seconds, which, as I said, with maxed out metal, that's a couple thousand plus HP every 10 seconds passively, which is really, really good. In support, it's 4%, which is less good, but still nice to have. So in my example earlier, if you've got a Base Kyle buffing your builds, Power Base will heal 11% of the total health, which means Power Base is actually better if you're using one person Power Base, the other person Base Kyle, and if a third person is using Ice King, nothing's getting through that wall. If you got teamwork going on, that is a buffed build. So like I said earlier, every single one of these heroes is an excellent support. You just pick whichever one works for you in the commander slot. Statistically, the answer is Ice King or Base Kyle. Understandably, I like Mega Base, but it's whatever. It's all preference. The other 3 should be in support. Now, those work for every mission type. At any power level, especially the end game, this might not be necessary in like Plankerton, for example, because usually your weapons should be a little overpowered by then. Ventures is also great because you don't require certain weapons. You just throw on the hero loadout and go. But there is one more hero that really only applies to Endurance or Ventures, and that's Machinist Harper. I don't play Endurance, so I don't use this character a lot, but increasing your trap durability by a ridiculous amount, and it's a global buff, by the way, not just under her base, but I mean the entire map every trap has a 52.5% trap durability increase. That's a really good perk for endurance when you need your traps to last. I also say Ventures because Ventures does not take into account your survivor squad. So plenty of people have Machinist Harper built in. They just have trap durability survivors buffing their trap durability. And that's a really good bonus to have in your set bonuses. But when it's ignored in Ventures, you might need to address that situation. Now I say might because it's really not strictly necessary. I have pretty much never used Machinist Harper in Ventures, but if you find that your traps are breaking, consider throwing her in the lead or support. On that note, if you're using a regular build that is focused on weapon damage, you don't need to be a constructor. You can just put her in support for any loadout. If you're running around farming and you want your traps to do the job, she will increase their trap durability regardless. Now, that was a ridiculous amount of information. So before we move on to the support perks, let me just show you what this looks like when everything is said and done. Like I said, I like Mega Base, so he's staying in the commander slot. If you have all the heroes I mentioned, Base Cal should be in support, Frozen Castle should be in support, and then I skipped out on Blast in the Past, so we're just going to make sure that Power Base is in support. Again, Power Base Nox is what you'd want to use, and I'm going to leave him here just so the icon doesn't get confused by new players. You know, my Power Base Penny Flex is always there in spirit. And this is pretty much what a normal build can look like. And then there are some other support characters that we'll talk about in a second, but this is pretty much what it's starting to look like. You see what I mean? Every Constructor loadout is the same 4 characters at least, and then you got like 2 open perks, maybe 1 considering that base MD is kind of insane. So if we're going to move on to the support characters, we might as well talk about what's going on. Warden Kyle just went from D tier to S tier. In fact, in preparation for this video, I was looking at my own Constructor tier list, and this is a really great resource, but Warden Kyle used to be D tier in my opinion. And honestly, I stand by that. But they made his healing bonus 6 times stronger, and he gives you energy, which is so good. That means everybody standing on or around the base, this is new too, the effect continues for 3 seconds even when you're not standing on the build. So if you've got a mega base commander with Warden Kyle in support, your team is going to be fully healed if they are anywhere near your base. It's so good. So your health will be fine, and then you'll be generating energy. So if anybody in the squad is spamming any kind of ability or melee heavy attack, they will be completely refilled. Or if it's a nature mission and those enemies are draining your energy and you need more, 2 energy per second is great. Again, I really don't think he's a commander. You could, if you need it, go for it, ignore me. But if you know what you're doing, you can make use of that. I really think he's a support character first and foremost, but obviously he can be good in commander. But we talked about the other options. You probably understand why I think that. Now, the second one I want to talk about is an interesting one, Thunder Thora. Now, she does better the lower level mission you're in. She will do next to nothing in the end game. 12.7 base energy damage every 5 seconds is not a lot at all, but it is completely passive. If you're a very high level player and you're AFKing like a V-Buck mission or something, she's great in support. In fact, if you're just AFKing a mission like that, you might put her in the lead. That could make sense too, but if you're putting her in the lead, maybe that can work in Ventures for a little bit. It's a good amount of damage, but it falls off heavily late game, so be careful getting comfortable with that strategy. It will not work forever. She's just a good hero to kind of have. Like I said, she's in my support kind of often just because I'm running lower level missions with base, and she helps a little bit, albeit not that much. And the exact same story goes for Electro Pulse Penny. She's kind of the same thing. When enemies smack your base, they take 15 base damage. It's not a lot. I even have like a little clip of that where I was watching her be useless in my Supercharged Traps video. Like, it is damage, but the enemy was healing itself faster than it barely did anything. So again, you could put her in the lead, but I don't know. I still think Thunder Thora is better. If you're AFKing a mission, you don't want the enemies to be smacking your base. You want them to just die by standing on it. So same story as always. If you put Penny in the lead or Thunder Thora in the lead, the other one will be in support, so it doesn't super matter, but she's a great support perk if you just want a little bit of extra damage. Speaking of a little bit of extra damage, Heavy Base Kyle. So Feel the Base is a little complicated, but let's read through it. Eliminating enemies standing on structures affected by the base will charge up the base to 30, and then it'll emit an explosion that knocks enemies back and deals damage. What that means is if enemies are standing on your glowing builds and you shoot them or kill them in any way, traps count of course, then it'll charge it up to 30, and once 30 enemies have died, it'll go brrr, and it'll do a bunch of damage. It's only a 3 tile radius, which is not that much, and 39 base damage is okay, but I have never noticed this. Every time I've paid attention to this perk, it was the same story as the other 2 gals. It just did not do a lot of damage. damage, you can put him in the lead, but it still requires you to be killing enemies. So I just feel like you can do better. He's nice in support if you just want to fill out the squad and do a little bit of extra damage, but I can't seriously consider him a super viable option. So I'm just going to leave it at that, give you guys the information and go from there. And then the last one. Yeah, that's it. Last one I want to talk about is Bomb Squad Kyle. He has an armor bonus in there, so you take less damage. Again, do I need to say it again for anybody in the back? If you use Bomb Squad Kyle, you take less damage. It could not be more simple than that. Now, we can get complicated and explain how armor values work, but I don't wanna. It's a little bit of math, and you don't really need to worry about it. If you use him, you take less damage. If you're already using Blast from the Past and Prehistoric Iza, she will be better with your armor, you know, with your shield missing, her armor bonus is higher, and you really shouldn't use both, but you can, and you'll be fine. So, yeah, that's it. That's my Constructor loadout video. You now know all of the best commanders, you now know all of the best support characters, and if you are still missing anything I mentioned, then look through your inventory. Whatever makes sense, go ahead and use it. In fact, Eternal Wanderer is a brand new hero that just got added this season. She doubles your sprint stamina. A very simple hero again. She makes you run further. You might not be going very far as a Constructor, but you know what you're doing more than I do. Just scroll through your inventory, anything that makes sense. Fleet makes you run quicker. There are lots of different heroes in the game. There are heroes that buff Constructor abilities. Maybe you can throw in a Rosie bonus, you know, make your Rosie shoot a little faster. Like, there are lots of things you can look at and consider for yourself, but everything I just mentioned are my top recommendations for a base focused on defense. So there you go. It took people in my chat asking me for a Constructor loadout video about 400 times and many years of digging my heels in, but the recording is done. That is my guide. Comment down below if you guys liked it. You know, like the video if you liked it. Subscribe. These videos are conceptually harder to make than my normal recordings, and putting this together for you guys was kind of a fun time. So if you got anything out of this, a subscription would be nice, and I make lots of videos you guys might enjoy some more. So there's even a couple recommended here at the end in a second. So that's it. I'm out of here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy your new loadout, and have a good time. And then